Welcome to the Writer Reads Short Stories. This is What Happens on Axis 58, Part 3 of 5. Stay stay out of my head, I told the wide-eyed faces staring at me, and then grabbed my temper and held it tight. Kids, right? And they needed direction. We have to find the bridge. Right here, Larry said, and the schematics arrived in my implant. Tina, hand out the maps. She gave me a puzzled stare and then slipped cautiously back into my implant, just long enough to grab the ship's schematics and get back out again. Smart girl. Right now I glared at the next door. Anything through there? 6 heads shook back and forth while 6 others watched. I frowned at the closest. I need a weapon. Stick, wrench, blaster, chair. Keep an eye out. You can't fight an Arak with a chair. Tina had every right to doubt me, and that was definitely one memory I wasn't going to share, given it still gave me nightmares. She'd have to settle for trust. Sure you can. I didn't tell her that it didn't turn out real well. Right now, these guys could do with a bit of hope. Get me to the bridge. Maybe they'll stay asleep. And I can jigger with their pods so they never wake up, was another thought I hoped I hadn't shared. We also needed a fallback point, somewhere we could lock things down tight if the Arak did wake up. We can do that, Tina said, and I made myself ignore the fact she'd been trespassing in my skull again. Sorry, you were busy. And she didn't sound the least bit repentant. Whatever, right? It was a perfect imitation of a phrase I used an awful lot, which didn't matter so much now that we'd gotten to the entrance of the ship's control center. Bridge me, baby. More snickers. I rolled my eyes. Kids. Don't you lot have anything better to do? Not right now, we don't. We need computer access and a safe space to work it in, Piet pointed. And it's right through there. Which was my job. I got it. Clever of him not to rub my nose in it. My gut did an uncertain little flip, and I glanced over at Tina. 4, she said, talking directly into my mind and flashing 4 fingers before closing her eyes and briefly resting the side of her palm against her face. All asleep. My heart sank. I'd been hoping for dead, but the Arak were a spacefaring race. It made sense they'd have ways of surviving the long sleep between. Right, I'll go first, see if they're going to keep their eyes shut. That would be best, but whether she thought it was best if I went first or if the Arak kept their multitudinous eyes shut was lost to me. I slid through the link I'd made with Larry, bypassing the spiked wall of Arak code to tickle the door locks. He might not be able to reach his shell, but I could. I didn't want to know what other measures the Arak had employed to cripple him, but I sure hoped the kids could work it out. At least they'd be working behind the most aggressive bits of Arak defense. Challenge accepted, Piet murmured, but I was too busy to tell him to wait before getting into it. I just hoped Tina had him on a tighter leash. You wish. And the boy was gone, slipping through my implant and into Larry's system. Tina said a word I'd been avoiding and shaded it with the expertise of many years. I had to agree, but I was otherwise occupied. She'd just have to deal. I'll deal with you when you get back out, she snarled. Yeah? Oh, sure she would. She chose to leave that alone. We were both doing the usual pre-combat word dance, and I wondered where she'd learned it. Frontier world, she snapped back. Now, are you actually going to open that thing or just sit there and admire it all day? And since when had she been taking lessons from Mack? He swears more. And now I really wanted to know. Too bad. Get your sweet self through that door. Well, yes, ma'am, I thought. And don't you forget it. Don't let it go to your head. But I was already getting the door to open and signaling the Brat Patrol to move back. We're adopting that. What the stars ever? These children are a good influence on you, Larry observed, but I ignored him, sliding completely out of the implant and into the right here and now. The control center was a mess of webbing, with 4 Arak in human form situated to a side on the walls. It was a typical command deck, 4 consoles on either side with the captain's console at the rear, all faced in toward a clear space in the center. And there was an open view screen up front, although why it was open was a mystery to me. It wasn't like the Arak could admire the view with their eyes closed. You'd be surprised, came whispering across the deck and sliding into my mind. Vocals and sigh. Fantastic. I turned, trying to work out which one was awake enough to speak. It was bad enough the bridge was on emergency lighting and the control consoles dimly lit without the Arak coming out of stasis as well. We needed fodder for the journey. And hostages, too. Hostages wouldn't do them any good once they'd drained them. We don't need to drain you all. I figured out which one of them was conscious enough to be speaking and wished I could be sure the others would stay asleep for what came next. It is my turn to take the watch, the Arak said. I will only wake them if our prey turns difficult. It pushed its grey, human-like form away from the wall, stopping to stretch when it was clear. So what say you, prey? Are you about to become difficult? His tone suggested it would be a welcome turn of events, and I heard joints pop and tendons snap as it stretched again. Fear formed a solid ball in my stomach. Great. But he hadn't shut up. We all get bored. I swallowed against the sudden dryness in my throat, swallowed, and made sure I was squarely between him and the kids crowding around the door. Well, for pity's sake, did I have to think of everything? Tina. Yes, miss? Get them out of here. Find somewhere else you can access to take care of Larry, and don't let anyone on the bridge. But, miss, now! I'm not Cy, but I have enough experience that I can occasionally throw the odd person out of my head. Tina went, but she went promising vengeance. I was beginning to like Tina. I sure as starshine hoped the girl survived. As soon as the door closed behind her, I reached out and tweaked the locking mechanism. No darn way the spider was getting out. Not him, and not his friends, even if they could take me down, which was something I didn't want to think about. I'd pretty much had enough of these critters when they tried to invade Kokavor, but none of that mattered now. I looked around the room for a weapon, keeping a half eye on the waking monster. To be honest, if it hadn't woken up, I'd have crushed its skull, except I couldn't see anything to crush it with. Maybe locking the door hadn't been such a good idea. You stink of Vespis! Man, and here I'd been hoping these Arak were different to the last lot. Yeah, well, small universe and all that. Next thing you'll be saying is that you wake up hungry. The creature's lips curved, showing just the slightest hint of fang. Now that you mention it. Well, well, why wasn't there ever a chair around when you needed it? That wasn't an offer. I backed up another step, and its smile grew impossibly wide. That's really too bad. I patted the pockets of my ship's suit, wishing it was combat fatigues or body armor, and remembering I hadn't been allowed to take either when I'd gone babysitting. The Arak made a jerky, hissing sound, his species' version of a laugh. What? Forgot your blaster? I hadn't been carrying a blaster. The head of school had banned weapons, along with combat armor, and I hadn't figured a way of smuggling one in. Mack had told me to toe the line, and Tens hadn't answered his comms. Talk about your last laughs. I thought about unlocking the door again, and the Arak's smile disappeared. Leaving so soon? And I had second thoughts. There was no way I wanted to lead the monsters to the kids. Of course, there was no way I wanted to die either, but them's the breaks. I stepped away from the door, wondering how Tina would go being in charge of her classmates. Tell me you got them to safety, I said, knowing she'd pick it up out of my head. Yes, miss. I got them locked down and Larry's trying to come up with a plan. Spiders can't get to us, okay? Okay. I scanned the command center, figuring I needed cover first and weapons next. As I did, the Arak's shape shuddered and blurred, extra arms bursting out through its ship suit, and the rest of it bursting out afterwards. A long drawn-out moan bounced around the room, echoing in my ears, and I cut it short, keeping one hand on the closed door but my eyes on the spider. I tried to think of where Mack's crew would hide weapons, and realized I was in the only place short of an armory that might have anything that counted. I mean, how many times had Tens darted me with that thing he kept under his console? And this was a colony ship, right? A colony ship. on a world a long way from any kind of help.